So now let's move on to the October 25th partial solar eclipse. I have two charts. One is the Washington, D.C., right? That's the chart we normally use. I also put the one for Moscow, right? We could see here with this eclipse chart that it's much more prominent with the sun in the 10th house, Mercury on the midheaven. We see Pluto rising in the same sign as the ascending sign for the eclipse horoscope, right? So these are the two key players now. These two nations are going to be the one that will be calling the shots and determining the narrative. What's happening right now is that the U.S. is creating a shortage of dollars, right? They're doing quantitative tightening. You don't see dollars being exported to other countries in swap agreements anymore. They are tightening down. They're locking down. They're raising the interest rates. They're demanding payment on all those loans. That's why you have 72% inflation in Argentina, 100% inflation in all these in Turkey and all these other third world countries. And you have rampant inflation now happening in Europe. So the U.S. is creating a shortage of dollars, just as Russia is creating a shortage of oil, gas, and grain. So what's happening now is you're seeing that the European Commission chief is stating that we must cut Russia's revenue, which Putin uses to finance this atrocious war, right? In discussing a proposal to cap the price of Russian gas and force the Russians, they're going to force the Russians, say, we're determining the price of the gas and oil that you deliver to us. You are not going to determine it, right? So this is this is the arrogance. This is the hubris of the Euro elite, right? And we're seeing here that the Americans, because they understand that if the US dollar collapses, it's the end of everything. So they're going to tighten at the same time the US dollar, which is going to force all the world currencies. Everyone's going to start buying into US dollars. And when you see a dollar shortage, the dollar gets stronger and stronger and other currencies collapse. So the US is doing what it sees in its national interest, creating a shortage of dollars, just like Russia is doing what it sees in its national interest in oil, gas, grain, and fertilizer, saying, hey, you want to play this game? No fertilizer. You depend on our fertilizer. You depend on our grain. You depend on our gas. You depend on our oil. Let's see what happens 2-3 months from now. So you're seeing this with the global economy sputtering, markets are breaking down, things are going to start breaking. And the reason we can say this with certainty now, we saw this coming for over a year, is because this eclipse path goes right over Iceland, England, right through dead center into Ukraine and into the heart of Russia. Here's a close-up. Look at that. We see this is using astrocartography, Mars line, and the eclipse path goes right through Moscow. So this is ground zero for what is going to happen, meaning everything that's impacting here is all coming out of what's happening here. So if we look at the eclipse to the Russian horoscope, we could see that eclipse hitting right on the midheaven IC axis. It's very significant in what's happened. So eclipses often indicate developments, emergencies, scenarios, unprecedented developments of all types. And eclipses begin to happen 3 months. So if you go 3 months back, October, September, August, so developments that happened in late August are now being informed, shifted, shaped to the developments that will be happening between October 25th and November 8th, between the solar eclipse and the total lunar eclipse. So we could see here it's hitting this axis. And what do we see? We see US Pluto return. Ukraine is in a proxy war that could lead to a wider regional war. Now, this is an old slide. I put this here for our review real quick. Why? Because Russian soldiers are being killed by US intelligence operatives and American military assets and direct kinetic support and massive, sophisticated, cutting-edge weapon systems that are being shipped in daily. So we're looking at this eclipse chart here on the outer wheel against the inner wheel of the Russian Federation NATO composite horoscope. So if you want to understand like what's going on with two people, two business entities, two of anything, right? You could do it with more than two, right? You could do a composite chart. I use what they call a Davidson system. And you make this one horoscope that would indicate the agenda and purpose of those two entities. And you can see the eclipse is hitting it dead on, right? This October eclipse, dead on to the Russian Federation NATO composite horoscope. And that eclipse path, look at that. Perfect, right? So we also see the Pluto line. So really what we're seeing is an escalation of the proxy war due to US and UK forces in Ukraine, right, since the beginning of the conflict. Putin strikes back saying, we've lost nothing, right? He warns Western elites, sanctions fever will see European people freeze. So, right, Putin said the blowback from the EU and US-led sanctions and attempts at decoupling from Russian fossil fuel and all other exports, including grain and fertilizer, will be wrecking the lives in the West. He says, quote, now we are seeing how production and jobs in Europe are closing one after another. Putin said, stressing that this is happening as Western elites who would not or even cannot acknowledge objective facts about their situation. So they would not or even cannot acknowledge objective facts about global changes, revealing their growing detachment from the common people they claim to represent. And yet now European populations will freeze while being denied crucial Russian energy by Western elites who short-sightedly want to lash out in emotional response to the Ukrainian invasion. And Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping met at a recent summit in Uzbekistan. And these two large nuclear armed nations are wrapping up a joint war game among multiple other nations that are there representing, so including India. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing this massive break. And while this is all brewing, we're seeing a Lehman event looming for Europe as energy companies face a 1.5 trillion margin call. So again, like we saw in 2007, 2008, we are seeing that markets and market time move faster than both the real economy and political time. And this has major consequences. This is what we would call the black swan brewing. So remember, we have to remember now, European leaders knew in late July that a serious energy crisis was in the cards, to the degree that they deemed an immediate 15% reduction as a necessary measure. Yet they all decided to agree to a voluntary national restriction starting August 1st, right? And so now that the summer is over, Russia shutting off its Nord Stream 1 indefinitely while increasing the deliveries on the pipeline through Ukraine as a partial offset and maintaining the flow of the Turk Stream has focused a few minds. Businessmen, consumers, and politicians have gotten a message via skyrocketing energy prices that they may not be enough energy to meet ordinary demand, which means either new sources need to be found or big cuts are in store. So essentially, the history of Europe's search for cheap energy has been coal. The short version is nuclear looked like an important part of the mix until Fukushima occurred, when public pressure rose for a phase out of nuclear energy. Because there was no good options, Europe turned to even more Russian natural gas and Russian oil. So European energy companies are now facing margin calls of a total of 1.5 trillion in the derivatives market, and many would need policy support by the government to cover them amid these wild swings in skyrocketing gas prices and power prices. Liquidity at energy firms is drying up as many companies has started to struggle to meet their margin calls on the energy derivatives market. Some countries in the EU have already decided to set up their funds to avoid a collapse of their energy derivative market. So what we're looking at here is a potential Lehman Brothers event in respective energy industry and financial systems that could take down the entire banking system of Europe. Now, people would say, well, that's a little extreme, William. Yeah, but this eclipse is hitting all of these countries, right? I've just listed a couple here. Look what's happening here. Look what's happening when you look at the household electricity prices. right? Look at the UK. We're going to get to the UK in a moment because the UK is going to be ground zero. I thought it would be Germany, and Germany will be right up there, but it's UK. Europe is about to go full Hunger Games this winter, with the UK being even worse. And the real question is, how do you deal with astronomical prices of electricity and inflation at 13% going to 18% as predicted? That's pure insanity, right? And we also have to factor in that Ukraine and Russia's share on global trade. They're a huge agricultural producer that, right, in cereals, oil crops, wheat, right, the largest supplier of sunflower oil, all of that. And the fact that the global food crisis on the near horizon is already been discussed, and Europe's cost of living is skyrocketing. Empty shelf warning as the double impact of drought and gas prices cause food crisis, along with that the UN food head warns conditions worse than Arab Spring as inflation riots begin to spread all over Bangladesh. We're seeing it happen in the Middle East. We're seeing it in Egypt. Again, we're seeing all these, right? I'm not going to list them all out, but we're going to see this happen in Europe. It's going to start happening in Europe.
To watch the full presentation and more like this on geopolitics, the economy, and world events from an archetypal and mundane astrological perspective, join the Global Transformation Astrology membership. Go to gta.williamstickevers.com. Become a GTA member today.